Well, we get started when we're not going to do anything substantive before that. So I'll call the work session for the joint work session for the Planning Commission and the Oregon City Commission to order. It's now 6:17. Who's starting this party?
Hi, Laura Turway, Community Development Director for the city. We are here to talk about height limits in our mixed-use downtown. As you recall, this was part of a greater code package, which did include our equitable housing, and there are a couple issues that we needed to talk about a little bit more, and this is one of them. Pete Walter, a planner with the city, is gonna walk you through what our regulations are, and at the end of this, we'll be seeking direction from the committees to figure our commissions to figure out where we ought to go. Our next step after this is to come back on September 4th with some draft code amendments. And so, if you have any questions, we're here to answer them.
I want to wrap up my presentation by half past, but we can refer back to slides in it. So,
Okay.
yeah. So we have this map in 3 different locations that we can refer back to. This map illustrates all of the different height limits within the downtown area, and we're going to talk about those in more detail. This is the code that states the intent of the mixed-use downtown district, which was adopted in 2003 to implement the city's regional center designation. And we can refer back to these dimensional standards as well, but I'm going to talk about all these in more detail. So the maximum height in this zone is 75 feet, except for these areas here, which are listed. Between Main Street and McLaughlin and 11th and 16th, where it's 45 feet. Within 500 feet of the end of the Oregon Trail Center, where it's 45. Within 100 feet of single-family detached homes, where it's 45. And within the downtown design district, where it's 58 feet. So the first one of those we'll talk about is the area between Main Street and McLaughlin and 11th and 16th Street. That's illustrated here. This includes some properties that are owned by the city, and we've got some slides that illustrate this area and how it looks today. This is a zoomed out view indicating the topography of the bluff and where the river sits in relation to those blocks. During the Planning Commission and part of the City Commission hearing process, you heard testimony from the public about this and the Planning Commission about the need to preserve views towards the river from various locations. Today.
Can you go back one second?
Yeah, okay.
So these 50s and 100s, I assume that's elevation above sea level?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. So here's what that area looks like today if you walk around and take pictures. Yeah, so the regional center designation is the area within which Oregon City is concentrating its mixed-use development in order to get higher intensity urban development. And one of the ways that we can do that is by having higher height limits. And we'll talk about why that is briefly. And the other location which limits heights are whenever you are next to or a single-family residential use or in this location, that use can have the effect of limiting the height limit within the mixed-use downtown. So those red dots indicate where we think all of the single-family residential uses are in and adjacent to the mixed-use downtown that have that effect. Downtown Design District is based on the height of the Masonic Temple building, which is illustrated there. It's 58 feet. And then the final location that we're talking about is within 500 feet of the end of the Oregon Trail Center, which is where that red area indicated. And that buffer area affects these tax lots. So those tax lots are all affected, including, the tax lot for the Rossman landfill site. So why do we have higher building heights in downtowns? Basically, that's because land is scarce and expensive for residential and commercial uses in downtown. And that drives the decision to have higher height limits. Some of the local considerations and policy documents that talk about this in some detail include our comprehensive plan, some of the studies that have been done for the downtown area, including the parking study and the development opportunity study for the city-owned properties in the downtown area. And they generally talk about having higher intensity uses with ground floor retail and 3 to 4 floors of residential and office above that. And then those units obviously become more attractive for real estate investment and views and provide some incentive to redevelop in those areas. Again, this is the map that we can refer back to. So now we're going to look at some pictures of buildings that we're all familiar with and the various heights of those buildings today. This shot is of the downtown design district, where you can see the Masonic Temple is about 4 stories, 58 feet. The courthouse facing Main Street is 3 stories, and then it has 4 stories on the backside facing 99E. Bush Building is 2 stories and 40 feet to the parapet, and the Bank of Commerce is 3 stories, 40 feet to the parapet. And here's what those buildings look like from the Google Street View. The Masonic Temple, 4 stories, and these are all above grade, these stories. And then if we added a story to that, it might look something like this, probably adding about 12 to 14 feet to that. Bank of Commerce building, 3 stories, 40 feet. And then if that had 2 more stories on it, you know, that would significantly change. Not that you could do that because they're not seismically, you know, up to grade, up to code, but, you know, it's just to illustrate things. Bank of Commerce building now looks like that from the side street. This is the Bush Building with 40 feet to the parapet. And that's just a 2-story building, but it has very high ceilings. And then the courthouse. And if you're looking at the courthouse from 99E, that's what you see coming northward. And if that was slightly higher, 2 stories, it might look something like this. This is a remodeled building in the downtown design district that's 35 feet tall to the parapet. And then the buildings on the hilltop that we know familiar with, in the Clackamas County's Development Services Building, almost 60 feet tall, 4-story buildings with very high ceilings. This is the Development Services Building. Another shot of the Development Services Building. And this is the Administration Building, which is about the same exact height as the others, 58, 60 feet. Back down in the mixed-use downtown next to the end of the Oregon Trail Center, this is the Hampton Inn that was approved in 2017. And they requested an adjustment through the master plan process to be able to exceed the 45-foot height limit. They're also building in the floodplain, so they had to raise the building above the flood level. And that's 57 feet from the design flood elevation to the top of the mechanical penthouse. I wanted to kind of give you an idea of what the area along 99E and the Main Street, between Main Street and McLaughlin would look like potentially. Currently, we're looking at buildings that are about 12 to 14 feet tall. And if we added some stories on there, it might look something like that. Obviously, you know, you can do a lot with design, windows, articulation, and that sort of thing. And then the building opposite that looks something like this, if it was 70 feet tall. So back to this slide. This is the summary of those height limits. This is the map we can refer to. And we're just going to ask some questions and open it up for discussion. The first question we ask is, should the maximum height limit for those properties between Main, McLaughlin, and 11th and 16th be 75 feet, or should it be 45 feet? staff's recommendation is to allow 75 feet in this location. And we can go through the rest of the questions, or we can stay on this one and discuss it.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask Mr. Walter a question, please?
Sure.
Pete, are you giving a presentation or what I would like to see is, are you giving on your presentation, what the planning commission recommended and what the compromise was and why we did what we did?
Sure.
Because this seems really a little loaded towards what the staff wanted from the beginning when we were discussing this.
Well, in your packet, we had a summary of what the planning commission discussed for this area. So they supported reduced maximum height to retain views from I-205 to the end of the Oregon Trail Center. And the only recommendation that they made with respect to changing things was to change the height limit sentence with respect to single-family detached to abutting single-family detached instead of within 100 feet of. So there's definitely support from the Planning Commission to do that, and they wanted to recommended retaining the 45-foot height limit in this particular location to maintain visual corridors while transitioning heights from McLaughlin Boulevard. There was some concern as to why only those views in certain locations were preserved and for the desire to maximize densities along the highway, but the ultimate recommendation from the Planning Commission in 2018 was to keep 45 feet in this location.
And it was a compromise. We went back and forth a lot.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to accept or anything else. Commissioner Smith?
So my question is, in the downtown design district, what is the elevation? So my note from from between 13th to 16th Street, it's about 50 feet. So in the downtown core, the elevation is a little higher, correct?
The height limit and the...
No, not the height limit.
No, the elevation.
The ground floor level. My point is if the elevation is lower between 13th and 16th Street, the height of the buildings, could be higher and still be level with the Masonic Lodge. And without knowing the elevation at the the north end of Main Street, I can't really determine that.
Could...
I think there's a floor there.
It drops about 10 feet
Right, so about a floor.
From 10th moving down, moving north.
Right.
Drops about 10 feet.
So, because to me, that makes a big difference. I don't mind seeing higher buildings on the north end if it balances out to being essentially consistent with the core of downtown. I guess the other point I would make is, why are we saying 45 or 75? There's two floors there. There's an in-between also that we need to be discussing possibly as well.
What do you mean in between?
Well, the recommendation is 75 feet or 45 feet. There's an in-between there. There's 30 feet, so
Oh, I see.
we're adding two floors. There's a middle ground there that we could, between the staff recommendation and planning commission recommendation.
I would agree with Commissioner Smith. I think the visuals were very telling. The impact of a quantum jump from 45 to 72 feet is very different than the other. I believe that the one slide actually had relative elevations above sea level, the first one.
We can go
Mayor
back
asked
to
Didn't
that.
go to the.
Didn't go to downtown.
I don't see where it is
They did not go to
downtown, so I
downtown.
can't compare it.
Well, it also helps in making decision on what we place on the north end of town
Right.
also.
So it's about 50,
Sorry.
there it is. So it says about 50 feet in that area, but
But it doesn't really tell us.
farther,
These
south,
are,
I
but
want to know.
Once you get down Main Street, yeah. Because that's really where the drop is
Right.
past
Right.
Clark Masada Park.
So I definitely see you can get another floor in and still have it not surpass the Masonic Lodge.
Commissioner Mahoney?
One of the things that we did not zero in on is the impact that this is going to have on downtown Oregon City as it relates to infrastructure. Is there anybody here that is convinced in their mind if we take and just carte blanche, let the height be what the economy will, what the economy will bear, you know, out, if it pencils out and goes high as they want, that we're gonna be able to respond with public policy that's gonna be able to handle the increased traffic, increased pedestrian crossing at dangerous intersections and things of that nature. I'm coming at it from the standpoint of public policy. After that, then we can talk about, the visual impact and things of that nature. I don't think we have the response for infrastructure down there to handle that kind of increased density. You're gonna pack another 5,000 people into that downtown area, which is limited in and of itself geographically between the bluff and the river.
Well, you're assuming that all of those existing buildings will go away and brand new buildings will be built.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's necessarily the case. A couple of those buildings, I would consider of historic value, certainly the community corrections building that's there now, being, you know, Weiler and somebody else before that. You know, some of them are obviously garbage, like Clackamas County's, you know, sat between, Clackamas Auto Parts and the mall. I mean, that's a, you know, not a great site, but from the view shed sort of thing, you know, everything that's past, say, Clackamas Auto Parts going north, there really isn't much residential view that you're gonna block there. So it comes back to that question about, you know, certainly parking would be an issue for, and it has to be looked at, just like the one at 10th and Main, you know, that they're anticipating how they're gonna deal with parking. So parking is really the only infrastructure thing I would see that would be a problem. Both traffic, vehicle traffic and pedestrian traffic, you know, we're handling that okay, and we will continue to be, and no matter what we do, we can't widen Main Street, so you can't add lanes. So it's just a matter of, you know, where do we park these people and how do they get around?
Pete, got a question for you. The northernmost yellow square up there, all the rest of them go out to McLaughlin, that one doesn't?
Yeah, that's the on-ramp to, ODOT,
It's what- oh,
right?
it's ODOT right away, okay.
And the rest of that's parking for the car dealership.
That's right.
Okay.
Any idea what the elevation change is to the uphill side of the tracks?
It varies,
Hillside.
If you're going
it varies quite a
to the right
bit.
side of the tracks,
At
you'll be
the
there.
planning commission level, we did all these cross sections, and it ended up being a little bit confusing because all it meant is it's steeper in some areas and less steep in others. So we didn't show them.
And the
to you
flat
this
goes
evening.
farther back on the north end, so you lose a lot more elevation, you know, on the north end than you do up closer to 11.
Yeah, and we can approach this discussion this evening two ways. One is if you want to look at the overall area and the map to see if we have a general sense of what you want the height limits to be, or we can zoom in on these individual items if you like. We assume sort of individual items, but if you want to talk about the area as a whole, if that's more helpful, we can do that too.
So the Masonic building is 4 stories, 58 feet, right?
Correct.
And if we moved the Masonic building down into one of these blocks, it would be another 10 feet or so lower down than Main Street, so you could add one more floor.
Yeah, that's my point. I don't know,
It
but I
varies.
think.
I was looking at the land. Well, so first off, the big picture question is, do we want no building in all of mixed use downtown to be taller than Masonic? Or is one area of
That's- I
downtown
think
treated
that's-
different than the other? I mean, just bigger picture scale, and then we can walk you through the elevations.
Well, I'm not sure why the height of the Masonic building is, I mean, you know, the fact is that as we grow and build and change, things are gonna be different, and it would be kind of boring, actually, if everything was exactly 58 feet tall.
I think we're missing the point.
What's the point?
What is it you want downtown Oregon City to be? Ask that question first, and then what's it gonna take to get there? If you want it to keep it the same, then the heck with these tall buildings. If you want the building to be tall and downtown Oregon City to change its all-American downtown community, a pedestrian active environment, then keep it the way it is. If you don't, then let's go for the big tall buildings. But ask that question and answer it first.
Well, I think you're right in that respect, but the other fact is that we're looking to get more people living downtown to even further activate downtown as far as retail and that sort of thing.
That's a decision that apparently has been made. And if everybody agrees to that in a comp plan, which is supposed to be a community statement about what we want Oregon City to be, then so be it. But I feel strongly about, ask that question first. What are we trying to achieve, and how do we get there? We're talking about how we get there before we're asking, what do we want to be?
Dan?
Yeah.
The historic downtown core has the Masonic as its template, the same as the 7th Street corridor has a couple of other buildings, because they're trying to be consistent, because between 10th and 1st is the historic part of Oregon City. It has nothing to do with the metro standards. It has everything to do with keeping something in a similar range to the historic core. So once you get out of the historic core, it's a completely different story. So that's not the question that we're trying to solve. The question we're trying to solve is whether or not we want to make a change to the area that was specified in yellow. That is the question. We're not going back and revisiting the design guidelines for downtown and discussing changing heights there. We're talking about the area that's outside the core. We also talked about that with the Willamette Falls district that we're creating, and we want to make sure that those two districts that are going to be linking up in the future, very soon future, that there are consistency in terms of our historic preservation. So my statement is the question we're trying to solve is what do we want to do with the area beyond that? That's the question.
Right, and I think maybe Laura, you and Pete could give us the thinking behind the staff's recommendation of 75 feet for that area?
The area on the map is within a regional center, and that's meaningful. Our comprehensive plan certainly talks about regional centers quite a bit. It's meant to be a place where we serve the needs of our citizens and the needs of those communities around us as well. It's hard because obviously it's not built like a regional center right now. I mean, we have single-story industrial uses in areas that we have planned for things that are very different from single-story industrial uses. This map seems a little bit haphazard. So the height limits are sort of generally all over the place. And the discussion for heights in mixed-use downtown came up originally through the Equitable Housing Group. And the thought was, if we want to have more housing, then we could allow more buildings to be taller.
Right.
That being said, it depends on the market where these building heights actually go. We have struggled to get buildings to meet minimum building heights in other places within the mixed-use downtown, not necessarily the old town core, but other places certainly. So the thought process was, if we provide opportunity for property owners to have taller buildings, those extra stories would probably be more likely to be residences, and residences in our downtown will help create a more thriving downtown, but it'll also create more opportunities for housing our citizens as well. And so there's been lots of discussions on height limits in downtown, mixed-use downtown, throughout the past year where we've been in hearings. But yeah, that's the general thought, is if the purpose is to add more housing, this will have an opportunity to have more housing.
Dirk, Patty, you got anything?
I got a question
Yeah?
for Pete.
Yep.
I noticed on the Hampton Inn document, it showed that it was built above the floodplain. Is the floodplain an issue in any of these areas? Or is everything above it?
Yeah, the floodplain affects approximately half of the southern.
So the building
northern
heights
part.
building heights would be above the floodplain and go up from there, and it wouldn't be ground level?
Right.
Right, and under our height definition in the code, we amended that with the planning commission to say that it would be measured in those locations from the design flood elevation, so as not to penalize properties that
Okay.
had to
So the
build above the flood.
So if somebody wanted to put in a parking garage,
That's like,
wouldn't take
Parking
away
garage
from
is a little
the
different
height
because it's
limit?
not habitable space. We're talking about.
Yeah, but let's say there's like 6 feet of floodplain and they use 12 feet for a parking garage.
Yeah,
They're not losing 12 feet, they're losing
No.
6 feet of their buildable height?
well, maybe 6, I don't know.
If half of it was under the floodplain?
This area,
Possibly.
the area where this hotel is proposed is one of the worser areas for the floodplain. So
Right.
it's definitely the highest up in this section of the city towards
Right.
the end of,
where is it in the yellow blocks?
Yeah,
it's not
It's
in
not-
the yellow
it's not in the
box,
yellow
this is
box.
across from the EOT.
at what street does that situation present itself, the floodplain?
It
Downtown.
goes all the way from, so if you're, start at the bottom of the hill at Washington, right about there, and Tony's Fish Market, and would go almost up halfway to McLaughlin Boulevard before, or about halfway to Main Street.
Can you put the yellow
the
blocks back
railroad.
up? This is not, that wasn't helpful.
I got it.
Keep going.
Mhm. That one.
Yep. So,
Any of those affected?
no, that's
So
the one.
none of those are affected by the floodplain as far as the yellow is concerned.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's something else we need to think about. It's not just where the tops of the buildings are. It's what it looks like to a pedestrian
Yes.
on the sidewalk. And hopefully, we're gonna have a lot of people moving between the Clackamas Cove area and the EOT and headed to downtown in the Willamette Falls District. And we don't wanna have, we don't wanna have New York City tunnels. So that's something else to think about. And I'm gonna play off what Commissioner Smith said. Masonic Building's 58, the hotel's 57. What would be wrong with that yellow area? Would it make sense to have that at 60 feet? Split the difference.
Yeah, it could easily
A little
be
bit.
in between.
Because the stagger back from the river does make some visual sense. But this is also a great chance for us to get the high-density housing at a lot less of a traffic impact than if we tried to do it somewhere else in town, away from 205 and 99 East.
So let me think like a builder,
Uh-huh,
which I have some experience in.
yeah.
The higher the height limit is, the more economically feasible it is to build a building.
Sure,
So because the more people you can put in it,
Elevators, that's not the cheap.
you know,
right.
that's just fact.
Going up.
So the
cheaper
question
going up.
is 58 feet 4 stories? Is 53
Right,
stories?
Right.
I'd compromise at 65 or 70.
I wouldn't. I seriously, I agree with what Mr. Mitchell said.
60
I'm not gonna say that the taller building creates a canyon effect, but I want it to be livable. I'm fine at 58 to 60, but I'm not fine above that.
I have no idea if I'm fine or not, because I don't know the elevation of downtown, and I don't know in comparison to that. And, you add in the floodplain issue, I mean, I want to see exactly what it looks like.
Well, remember, this is
See-
a work session, so we're
No, I know,
getting,
but
let's
those-
make sure
those
staff
pieces,
understands
I
the
think,
questions we
Will
want to
help
answer.
us a lot in
Yeah.
figuring out,
But your statement
That
is
middle
valid,
ground.
Commissioner Smith.
Yeah.
I mean, if you add another 12 feet to get you, and you start at the floodplain, then it's 12 plus whatever, 60, then you are at 70 feet
Right.
true above ground level.
I think we have some stuff.
There-
Thank you. Well, one thing I'm seeing is it's basically one district, we call it a certain zone. The heights, like you said, different heights allow different types of buildings to be built. It, gives you a chance to build a parking garage underneath, give residents a place to park. If we treat one side of the road one way, and then we treat the other side of the road the other way, we're affecting the value of the properties that the people on that side own. So we're kind of discriminating against those folks and reducing their value, and It just seems like we should kind of keep it a little more even, treat everybody the same.
So are you saying we diminish the value of those people's
If we
property?
give them a
so we'd have an
lower,
obstructed
lower
view?
maximum height, yeah.
Understood. I think it's valid.
I got a question on, if we're looking at the top of the buildings, do we want them all to be cookie cutter, same height from the Falls all the way up to 16th? Or are we open to some variation in elevation and
Well, that's what I, yeah.
not too concerned with what level we start at, but we could put some three floors or 4 floors, and they're not gonna all be the same.
Well, I don't think everybody's
I don't
gonna
think
want
they
to
will
build the
be.
max.
Yeah, the market's gonna build them however they want.
Some
They're
people
not
might
gonna
build a short
magically
one,
go to the maximum.
just even, it may be zoned for 75 feet, doesn't mean every building's gonna be 75 feet.
Yeah.
Right.
Commissioner Gage?
Affect the downtown though.
And that is one of the things I was gonna say too, not everybody is going to want to go to the maximum level, not everybody's gonna even wanna change where they're at, but one of my
Hey,
thoughts.
let's just have one conversation at a time, please.
One of my thoughts is, can we limit, if we can go up to 75, can we say 50% of them can go up to 75 and 50% of them up to 60 or something like that? So
That
that you
starts to
have a
get really
variation.
complicated.
I mean,
I don't wanna do zoning
I
like
was
that.
thinking, compromise wise, that might help get more of what you're looking for and not,
Right.
you
So
know.
Laura, so maximum height anywhere in the city right now is what?
80,
80?
and
Okay.
Willamette Falls downtown.
And so if we put these, this yellow area at, say, 60 feet, which is only a couple feet taller than the Masonic building, so that shouldn't be, a big effect. If somebody came in with a project like the hotel, they could still come to the planning commission for a variance,
Yeah,
right?
they did for the other one.
They can.
Then I'm okay at 60.
Just wanted to get back to Commissioner Smith's question. The elevation in front of the Masonic Temple, we think is around 66 feet, and it's
So it's another 15 feet,
50 over here.
15, yeah. So there you go, there's the floor.
Can I just bring up a technical thing? Sure. If the yellow area is gonna be a different height than the downtown design district, there's a gap here. The downtown design district's over here. And so we got this chunk here that is gonna get
It's,
misappropriated or misidentified or whatever.
the map says it's 75, is that correct? There's a
But that
little
would-
section of purple.
Here, I'll go back and show you.
That shouldn't be.
Right there, there's a little.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is I don't
So
think we
you're right
should jump
here.
up
Right.
for half a
No,
block.
no.
Go from 58 to 75 to 60.
Yeah.
That needs to go one way or the other.
Well, the likelihood is that the county's gonna find that one rectangular purple, that's the county's building.
Right.
And they're likely, once we give them, some height, it's likely to make that too valuable to leave as just, core office space downtown. I actually, and this is a little off subject, but I've looked at the possibility of, as we build the courthouse up on the hill, that we could move the transit center from downtown to at the, the county's campus, because that's where almost all of their services are gonna be happening, because community corrections is gonna move too. So that gives us the ability to get rid of the transit center down there that causes some issues, and it's just a dream of mine, so.
Not a bad idea.
It's a good idea.
And just to follow up on the contours, the contour at the Masonic building is 66. The elevation on the ground.
Yeah, so it's 15 feet.
It varies because it's not, the property's not flat,
So you
but
have,
closer to the main tree.
So what do you need from us tonight? Do you need us to come to consensus, or this is just educational and on the 24th? What do you need?
We need to know where you want us to go and what to write code for. Do
What the
we-
city commission wants?
What the city commission.
Right.
wants. Yeah, you'd asked for the joint work session with the planning commission, so do we want another one?
Right, but this is coming back before the city commission, so.
It will.
At this point, it's what will we want to see in the code for approval?
I think more important than that is what questions do we need to have answered by
From the
staff to
plan-
make the
right,
decision?
right.
Well, not only that, what input do we need from the planning commission? Because our discussion on this can happen at our meeting. What other discussion or what other items?
Is this, I'm confused, this isn't going back before the planning commission?
No,
Is it?
it's going back to,
No,
City
you guys
Commission.
had identified this joint work session and that's it. So if
Okay.
you want it to go back, it can. If you want to give us some general direction, we can do more work there on that as well. We'll do the analysis to make sure that all of our infrastructure can accommodate this through our criteria when we do the application anyway.
I think generally speaking, and somebody shout me if I'm wrong, but I think that we're looking at that 60-foot level, as long as, you know, Commissioner Smith can have some of those basic elevation questions answered. Because then, you know, if we do end up with a building that we all really want, and the only way we're gonna get it is for it to be, say, we're replacing Lithia. Or, actually, that's a bad example. Say we're replacing the empty lot right across the street from Lithia between Main Street downtown. If somebody had some use that we all really liked, we think it's still come to the planning commission and say, we'd like to go to the maximum height the city allows anywhere. And that would go through the system. But as far as just basic right now, I think 60 feet gives developers and folks the right opportunity. And if they really need some more, they can come ask the planning commission.
Is it, if it's okay with the city commission, we can play around with the maps. It'd be nice to stay with 58 feet, so we can do 58 feet for a chunk and then look at the other area. Just because it's strange to have 58 feet, then 60 feet, and then 75 feet. So we can try and look at making it a little bit more cohesive. It's fine with me. 58, 60.
So it'd be the same as the downtown design district?
It sounds like you're
Just
talking
58
between
feet.
58 and 60 anyway. That's the general range.
Well, yeah, and I would want to talk about that once I understand the elevation changes from south to north, because I'm pretty
looks like
sure that
15 feet.
it drops down quite a ways.
Okay, we can.
sounds like 15 feet, right?
Yeah.
65
Yeah,
at
but you're
the,
still, but you're still gonna come up though to get out of the flood.
right,
That's right.
right.
The base
That's what we
is, the base
suggested,
is always gonna be 1 foot above 50.7.
Well,
And it
Not-
varies the
Not
closer you
in
get
this,
to the river.
not in that yellow area that we're talking about, it's not.
So, yeah,
It's none of that's in the
floodplain.
None of that's in the floodplain.
Right, not in that area.
we show that separately, yeah.
Okay, we're done.
So would you like another work session on this, or?
No, I
No.
just bring back the answers, you know, to Commissioner Smith's question. If you think of anything else, you know, email it to Laura, and then,
No, I think
then
that's good. I mean-
we'll just talk about it at the hearing.
There is a couple other things that we had questions on, which is the height limit within 100 feet of a residential use. Is that, do
And
we
the
still want to
interpreter
keep that one
The
in?
recommendation was not that.
It previously was within 100 feet, it's been changed to abutting, was it not?
That was the
Correct.
planning
That's-
commission
That's the planning
recommendation.
commission's recommendation.
So the question is, do you want to change it to abutting, or do you want some horizontal distance between existing property and a higher?
I think the problem we have is the constraint of the area. So, you know, I imagine the planning commission was thinking 100 feet is quite a ways away from a particular lot, and
We thought that was
that,
unreasonable.
I think abutting, I would lean towards the abutting rather than, I don't want to restrict any development that we don't absolutely have to restrict.
Well, the abutting term still gives you the required setback is what, 15 feet from the sides? Is that what I read in the report?
I don't think we have to set that.
We don't have a setback in the mixed-use downtown zone, so it would,
Almost 15 years.
The other problem with existing residential is we don't necessarily always know what is a residential use. So you saw us take a guess at the properties that don't have business licenses and that aren't vacant.
Well, you're talking single-family residential.
Yeah, there's the standard that says if you're within 100 feet of a single-family residential, then you have that reduced height. And the crux of this area is that it's an area that was built industrial and some residential, but we zoned it for this mixed-use high density. So we do have a lot of those uses both around and within the district.
and that's what creates that discrepancy where you see those isolated blocks of 75 foot in the midst of a 45 foot area.
So what is the
Mr.
direction
Chairman.
on the 100 foot versus the abutment?
Commissioner McGriff?
So what we had a long discussion about, and I think that there's some confusion. I think the way it's written now, you had residential uses. We talked about residentially zoned property. We were talking about stuff in the McLaughlin Conservation District that's above. That's residential there. Down below, there might be a house, but if it's zoned mixed use downtown or whatever it's zoned, that was not our concern, whether that was, because that residential is going to turn over. It's the residential that was above that we were talking about, the residentially zoned properties.
The provision itself doesn't talk about zone, it talks about actual uses.
Right, so I
And that's
think we
where
need
we're,
it, right, I think we should change that to residentially zoned, not residential use, because somebody could live anywhere and it might not be the right zone.
that would be much more consistent with
I-
our
and
code
that's
where we
why
talk
we-
about
That's why we
zones.
suggested zone rather than use, because the use, you know, could be anywhere, if it's allowed.
Then we
Well,
also,
and what happens if you put, you know, some apartments in down there? Is that residential use?
Yep.
no,
Not single family.
Single family.
Commissioner Griff's talking about the zone. The other thing that we talked
Single
about a
family.
lot at the planning commission level too is this is like the bottom, it's a lower bench in elevation than a lot of the residentials, which are up top anyway, so even if
Right.
they're next door, you know.
I mean, I had a house at
Above the trestle.
13th and Monroe, and I could look out and see, you know, the I-205 bridge and stuff like that, but you really, because of the trees and the other things that happen before you get down to that level, there really isn't much view from McLaughlin neighborhood in that particular area, unlike, you know, up here along the bluff.
So does it make sense to limit heights around residential uses, or should it be tweaked to be around zoning, or?
I don't think there's enough residential uses in that particular area for us to worry about.
Can you go to that?
We do have that map that shows them, do we not?
Yeah.
We do.
I think those houses, most of those residences are much higher elevation though.
Yeah, they said.
Yeah,
They're above the
Way up
trestle,
there.
they're a little above the trestle.
right.
Those,
The trestle one right there, Dan?
those,
Yeah.
Yeah.
those wipe out or reduce the height
Way up.
for
Yeah.
a
You see
lot
over
of the
100
properties in mixed use downtown. Those are pretty much what's creating all of the
It's-
I mean, the
45.
closest single-family houses that I can recall would be about halfway up the hill, the ones that are just south of, what was Spicer's.
I don't know.
There's 3 houses there.
You have that, and then there's some houses back on Center,
And on 12th, and
And on
12th going
12th.
center.
and then Abernathy,
They're all over.
And next to the Tri-City Bridge.
and the ones on the hilltop, on Apperson, we're limiting the height of the property below
That's
the
really
lower
hard.
landfill.
I have a friend who lives on there.
I'm still at the point of, I think we could do 60 feet and, or 58 feet, whatever you want to call it. And then, you know, if somebody needs to get something better, they can come in with an application for a
Variance.
variance.
Okay, we'll do some options for you guys, for the September 4th, meeting, if that's
Okay.
good.
Anybody else have anything?
I do have something, sorry. I brought this up at the planning commission. Pete, can you bring up the slide that shows the area around the end of the Oregon Trail District?
Yeah.
The question that I asked, we've
Sorry.
got a property within 500 feet of the end of the Oregon Trail would be 45, 58, 60, whatever we land on. And that's the entire blue area, right?
Correct.
Yes.
But a lot of that is way more than 500 feet from the end of the Oregon Trail Center.
Correct.
But let me know if I didn't quote you right, but the interpretation is that if one little piece of the property is within 500 feet, then it applies to the entire property.
Entire property.
So we've limited the whole area there on the landfill to 45 feet, 60 feet.
No, not really. It's,
Yeah, you have on the map.
We did,
is that all one tax lot, Rossman?
yeah.
Then we have to figure out how to fix that because we're gonna wanna have some buildings when we finally do, develop the Rossman site that might be, you know, would make way more
Yeah,
sense.
the previous
There's
slide.
really no view shed for anybody at the, on the Rossman landfill side.
So this is what 500 would look like from the edge of the property.
This is 500 feet from the edge of the property, this is what that takes, and what we wanted to talk about tonight was a lot of the discussions about the buffer had to deal, we wanted to figure out why there was a 500-foot buffer around that EOT, And the thing that we figured out, or the only thing that we could come up with, was that it's the view corridor from the highway or from the freeway. And so we wanted to propose, if the commission wanted to consider just reducing the height limit between the end of the Oregon Trail and the freeway, because we couldn't really understand why we had it all the way around.
That's because they didn't do a whole lot of thinking when they built the thing in the
Well-
first place.
No, I think some of it had to go with standards applied to the Oregon Trail itself and distances from building around the Oregon Trail itself, the actual trail through Oregon. I mean, I think there was connections to that. So I think there was more than just the view corridor. The view corridor from the highway is a big one, but there was other, I think, issues connected with Oregon Trail itself that added to that buffer.
That's correct.
FYI, I checked the height of the wagon hoops are 50 feet from the base of the wagon hoop, so.
50 feet?
Yeah,
And the bases are built up out of the floodplain.
that's correct, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, all I'm saying, and I agree that between the end of the Oregon Trail and 205, we should have a reasonable height limit. I think going back the other direction onto the Rossman side, I think we really ought to think about allowing, you know, a higher,
Are you guys interested in seeing, I mean, I don't know how many people have driven down 205, both northbound and southbound, and tried to look at the end of the Oregon Trail?
it's limited.
It is now more than-
Evergreens
yeah,
have really
right,
taken off
right.
all around there, so, I mean, I understand the original
Right.
intent. I think things have changed quite a bit
For sure.
since then, and I'm not sure that you're.
How much time
I'm
you
not
have
sure
to
you're
do-
preserving anything.
You have a lot of rush hour.
Tony, you can see it quite clearly in the winter when the leaves are off.
They're evergreens, all.
Well, some of them are evergreens and some of them are deciduous. You still get some views through there.
Okay, so let's, why don't staff kind of mull that over as far as, you know, on the backside of what we would call the backside of the UOT. And then we could talk about that in hearing as well.
Great,
Do you guys have full direction now?
Yeah,
yes.
thank you.
And Commissioner Smith, would you please, you know, send any detailed questions to staff so they have time to work on them? Then we're adjourned. We're gonna take 5 minutes and we'll come back in the regular session.